The infamous Princess Chang of the Tang Dynasty was struck to death by lightning, with no bones left. The Yuan Dynasty celebrated the occasion and set off firecrackers for 3 days and 3 nights. The Tang Dynasty opened its eyes again and became a fool. The whole family was still chaotic officials and thieves. In order to regain her own territory, she had to endure humiliation and become a group pet in the chaotic officials and thieves' house. Her cousins doted on her greatly, her senior brothers held her in their palms, even the treacherous officials feared by the court treated her as a treasure. Emperor. I see that you resemble my white moonlight, why not be an empress to you? Tang Dynasty. Bring your dog's life. Gu Yi. I have a connection here, can we continue? Keywords of the novel. After being reborn, I became the heartfelt favorite of the powerful minister without a pop-up window. After being reborn, I became the heartfelt favorite of the powerful minister. Download the complete text. After being reborn, I became the latest chapter of the heartfelt favorite of the powerful minister. Chapter 1. Evil Country Demon Concubine. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 1. Evil Country Demon Concubine. In the 20th year of the Tianyuan era, Princess Yuan, the ruler of the disaster country, was struck and killed by the thunder of the heavenly punishment due to her serious crimes, and was enshrined on Mount Wufu. There is no surviving corpse. In the Yuan Dynasty, everyone celebrated together and set off firecrackers for 3 days and 3 nights. The emperor personally issued a decree to punish himself. As a ruler, I cannot restrain my elder sister, and she has become cruel, loyal, and cruel. Although she has caused harm to the country, she also has my fault. Now that she has been punished by heaven, I will revive the court and clean up the country. If heaven feels this, please give me a rain of rain. After months of drought, it rained heavily in Shangjing in an instant. At the same time, in the harem, Feng Chaoyang, who had his limbs chopped off, stared blankly at the sky. Her fair face was covered in burn scars, and she twisted and twisted like twisted, disgusting earthworms attached. Feng Chaoyang, you're still holding on and refusing to die. A slender woman slowly arrived, holding an umbrella and exuding a graceful and noble demeanor. The world is vastly different from the Feng Chaoyang, which is sealed in a clay jar. The crimson armor lifted her face, and the sweet female voice sneered coldly, "Cousin, look at you now, do you still look like a towering princess?" Feng Chaoyang has already lost consciousness. She was poisoned every day, her abdominal cavity ulcerated to the point where she couldn't even feel the pain, and her half-blind eyes were covered in a layer of white mist. In my chaotic mind, there are only 2 words. Ah Jing. The faint call of breath made the young girl in front of the vat smile in the sky. Your Majesty, how could you possibly come to see you, this despicable person? Do you think I don't know your dirty thoughts towards your Majesty, despicable person? Even if he has no blood relationship with you, he is still your nominal younger brother. When the late emperor died at the age of 6, Feng Chaoyang, as the only member of the royal family, was recommended by court officials to choose a younger brother for himself and named him Feng Jing. The small Phoenix Chaoyang and Phoenix Jing depend on each other for their livelihood, eating and living together. Until she was 10 years old, she eavesdropped on Feng Jing's background. He is not actually a member of the royal family and has no blood relationship with her. She quietly concealed this huge secret for him. But it was the person she relied on for survival, who gradually encroached on her rights, imprisoned her, and burned her to pieces with a fire. She was cut off and mud-sealed in a jar, poisoned day by day, and experienced the pain of her intestines piercing and stomach rotting time and time again. And outside, the stunt double Princess Chaoyang has done all sorts of bad things, causing anger and resentment. Why? A stream of blood and tears streamed down. Perhaps it was a moment of reflection, as Feng Chaoyang looked up in sorrow, trying to shake off the complex emotions that were surging in his chest. Hate, unwillingness, confusion, doubt. The girl approached with a clever smile and took the dagger from the palace maid's hand, fiercely cutting through Feng Chaoyang's throat. Apricot's eyes were filled with madness and excitement. You should die with this question in mind. Your Majesty will crown me as Empress tomorrow, and you, Phoenix, will die in this puddle of mud. Feng Chaoyang wanted to cover his neck, but could only lean weakly against the edge of the jar, with blood gushing from his neck. Her eyes were wide open. Make a terrifying, sound in your mouth. No, I don't want to die. I don't want to die. No, no. The hoarse sound of tearing apart flesh and bones explodes. Feng Chaoyang suddenly stood up. Her mind was shrouded in a layer of mist, and as the chaos gradually faded, a clear strange feeling swept over her. Fragments of memories that do not belong to her pierce into her brain. Oh my mother, why is this fool shouting so much? He almost scared me to death, and even the cherries fell to the ground. The maid dressed in a peach-red biker and a double-knife bun was cursing. Hey, you idiot, pick up the cherry. It's a good thing, swallow every one. Her tone was full of domineering commands. It's not like a maid. Feng Chaoyang glanced coldly, quickly digesting the memories that didn't belong to her in her mind. It also helped her clarify the current situation. She was reborn through someone else's body. The original owner's name was Tang Dynasty. He was a fool, but now at the age of 13, his status is very impressive. She is the granddaughter of Marshal Tang Jiang of the army. Tang Jiang holds the most important military power in the Yuan Dynasty, and everyone knows that he has a rebellious heart. He is a true rebellious and treacherous minister. Feng Chaoyang. No, the Tang Dynasty couldn't conceal its excitement. This is a chance given to her by heaven. She won't ask Feng Jing to sit firmly in the Feng family. Taking a deep breath, the Tang Dynasty secretly began to calculate. The original owner's background is somewhat bizarre. Back then, Tang Jiang arranged a prestigious marriage for his youngest son, but who knew that the family had an accident in the second year of their marriage? Although it was not a disaster to marry a daughter, the father of the original owner decisively divorced his wife and remarried someone else. The mother of the original owner gave birth to the original owner alone, and when she found out that she was a fool, she even calmed down and called her to recognize her ancestors. A year ago, the original owner fell ill and couldn't survive anymore. Her mother had no choice but to send her back. You can imagine what kind of life such a fool is living in the Tang mansion. Her father despised her for being a fool, and regardless of whether he asked, his stepmother felt that she was a thorn in her side. After much practice and humiliation, even the maid dared to play with her like a dog. Seeing Tang Jiang coming back, she lost her life. I want to know whose pen is behind it. Hey, idiot, can't you hear what I'm saying? I told you to pick up all the cherries on this ground and eat them. How can the maid's green heart shout? The Tang Dynasty stroked the dust on its skirt and stood up, murmuring in its heart. In the Tang Dynasty, since I have taken your body, I will definitely seek revenge for you. Take good care of the people you need to protect, and rest in peace. She turned to look at Green Heart. That pair of eyes, which had always been dull, became clear and translucent, with a sharp color faintly visible. She stood tall and upright, with one hand on her back, silently but with a look of disdain, full of aura. What do you call me? The indifferent voice was cold and clear. Green Heart inexplicably shrank her neck and was immediately shocked. You. Kneel down. The voice of the Tang Dynasty suddenly became sharp and sharp. Scared, Green Heart knelt down with a thud. Do you know, if something happens and I lose my life, who is the first person to die? The Tang Dynasty looked down at her from a high position. It's you. Green Heart trembled for a moment, her face turning pale. The Tang Dynasty said, My grandfather is about to return to the capital. Why did he send away all the other maids around me at this time, leaving only you? I've been pretending to be foolish all year, waiting for today. Greenheart understood at a thought. She is not from the Tang family, so the poop will naturally be stuck on her head. Mississippi. I really didn't want to harm Mississippi. I didn't know that Do Mama was so bold that she wanted to harm Mrs. Life. Do Mama. No, all of this was instructed by the third lady, and bullying Miss in daily life is also her command. Be bold and bite your master at will. I think you don't want it anymore. The Tang Dynasty looked at her lightly. A green heart flutters. Miss, what does this mean? The Tang Dynasty leaned closer to her and whispered, who can believe you, a maid with empty teeth. Now that you know the secret of the third lady, she won't let you live if you don't do anything that harms me. If you listen to me, I will protect your life. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. The Return of Tang River. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. The Return of Tang River. It's getting late at night. While the Tang Dynasty was having dinner, someone came to the main courtyard. A woman in her 50s is dressed in a 10,000 child blessing robe. Although she is a servant, she is very dignified, with a haughty face and a pair of inverted triangular eyes full of shrewd calculation. It was the companion of the original owner's stepmother. Grandma Do. Hey, where's the girl eating? Do Mama saw that the Tang Dynasty was still alive, and her face only changed for a moment before quickly returning to its original state. But gave Greenheart a fierce glare. Greenheart shrinks its neck as a quail. The Tang Dynasty grinned heartily, with a simple and dull expression on its face. It even waved its chopsticks twice, tossing the vegetable juice everywhere. Do Mama sneered and sneered, giving a look of Greenheart to go out with her. What's wrong with you? The medicine I gave you was not given to this fool. The Greenheart pounded in its chest as it pinched its hands and said, Mammy, what's that thing? Miss, can't there really be any trouble? Grandma Do rolled her eyes and took out the purse from her arms. There are 20 taels of silver here. You don't have to worry about what kind of medicine it is. After taking the medicine, you can just leave. Greenheart continued to work hard. Then how can I go out? I can't go out without the right cards. Grandma Do impatiently furrowed her eyebrows and took out her opponent's card from her arms to pass it over. Now it's done, isn't it? Grandma, don't worry, I will definitely handle this matter properly. Grandma Do nodded contentedly and left. Greenheart turned around and entered the room, directly giving her purse and matching cards to the Tang Dynasty, as well as giving her medicine. Girl, it's all here now. The Tang Dynasty played with it for a while and then handed it back. Take it and calculate the time. Grandfather will be back at the mansion in the next 2 days, and I will make my own arrangements then. A green heart flutters. How could it be possible? She hesitated and said, however, the letter I received yesterday said that it was the marshal's army that arrived in Yi City. How could it take 7 or 8 days to travel from Yi City to Shangjing? Leaning against the soft collapse, the Tang Dynasty's fingers twitched. Grandfather won't go with the army, he will definitely go first. It has been January and March since the death of Feng Chaoyang today. Tang Jiang returned to Beijing this time to report his work, leaving his eldest son and his family at the border, and only bringing his second son, his family, and his old wife. If what she expected was right, he plans to stay in Shangjing. So he must return to Beijing early to meet his confidants and lackeys. The green heart is speechless. I don't know where the girl's confidence comes from. But she took it on the second day, because it was late at night and the mansion was indeed bustling with activity. It was only after inquiring that she found out that Marshall and his team had really returned first. Miss, Marshall and the others, they have really returned and entered the mansion through the side door. The excited voice of Greenheart trembled. The Tang Dynasty nodded, while also confirming Tang Jiang's ambition. She stood up and said, after you knock me unconscious with something, go and inform Grandma Do that the matter has been completed. Then, take your wallet and matching card to go find your grandfather and ask him to save my life." The green heart stared blankly. "Auntie, girl. Just do as you please." The Tang Dynasty sat upright with closed eyes. How could she reasonably wake up without smashing her head? The green heart was ruthless, and it shook the inkstone so high. Bang! The Tang Dynasty collapsed on the soft ground. Upon receiving the news that Tang Jiang had entered the mansion, Lady Tang almost jumped up from the noble concubine's chair. "What? Father-in-law is back." The person wiped the sweat off their head and anxiously urged, "Third madam, prepare quickly. The old master and old lady have already entered the mansion." Tang Sanfu's heart was startled and he grabbed Do Mama. "You go to that fool's yard quickly, don't ask that girl to take action. My father-in-law and mother-in-law are not fools. They are a pair of shrewd old men, and those simple methods cannot deceive them." Grandma Do let out a belch. Before he could leave, someone reported that it was Green Heart from the Tang Dynasty court who came to report. Madame Tang muttered to herself that it was not good, and she unsteadily supported the armrest. She gritted her teeth and persevered, "Tell her to get out of here." Green Heart came in trembling and knelt down on the ground with a thud, kowtowing. The sound of the jar echoed in the jar, saying, "Madame San, you've already made it." Madame Tang suddenly felt a chill all over her body. Do Mama supported her and urgently asked, "Has the person died?" Green Heart: "Yes, I tried breathing and I'm already out of breath. The front is the father-in-law who is about to enter the second gate, and the back is a dead fool. Mrs. Tang San only feels like she has been placed on an oil pan. Hurry up, go pack up and tidy up. Don't call me father-in-law. How could he not know? It's just a temporary delay." Grandma Do also panicked and ran away. The main courtyard was in a state of chaos and chaos. Green Heart took advantage of the chaos and ran out. When the third lady remembered and planned to tie her up and throw the pot, she had already knelt before Tang Jiang. "I beg Marshal to save my girl's life." In order to escape punishment and survive, Green Heart forced herself to suppress her fear of old Tang and succinctly said everything that the Tang Dynasty had told her. After speaking, he handed over the medicine, silver, and matching cards. Tang Jiang took the things and glanced at his old wife. He is over 50 years old and approaching his 60s. Looking at him in his early 40s, he was tall and sturdy, with a pair of deep ancient well-like eyes that were sharp like eagles. In contrast, Mrs. Tang appears older, with a dignified appearance, exuding a noble demeanor and imposing presence. She furrowed her eyebrows and waved her hand to have someone serve Tang Jiang and the others rest first. "The matter of the harem is not related to Marshal, just leave it to me." Tang Jiang also means the same. A foolish granddaughter, he really didn't take it to heart. It's grace to keep her eating and drinking and not let her die. When Tang Laofu and his group arrived, Do Mama was in a hurry and hurriedly asked someone to lift Tang Dynasty out. The thin and small girl drooped her head, unaware of life and death. "It's already autumn and I'm still wearing a thin shirt, skinny and unrecognizable. This is really a case of taking bribes and getting it." Tang Laofu was furious. "Put the person down for me." Do Mama trembled and knelt down with a thud, covered in cold sweat and lying on the ground. Madame Tang San rushed over. Seeing this scene made my heart cold. "You are really a good steward and legitimate mother of the third family. She is also the legitimate daughter of our Tang family. You are so bold." Madame Tang sternly rebuked Madame San. Madame San also knelt down and opened her mouth, but couldn't say anything to refute. Grandma Do has the courage to speak. At this moment, the Tang Dynasty woke up. She opened her misty eyes and looked around the crowd in confusion, finally shifting her gaze to Tang Laofu. "Grandmother, are you my grandmother?" Am I still dreaming? End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Goodbye, bitch. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Goodbye, bitch. The fool suddenly woke up and stunned the third lady. Mrs. Tang felt extremely surprised. She had never seen the Tang Dynasty, so she shouldn't have recognized herself. The Tang Dynasty covered its painful head and racked its brains to recall. I had a dream where an old man said that my suffering had come to an end, and that my grandparents had already returned. He even showed me their appearance. Following the marshal in battles all year round, old Lady Tang never believed in the strange and chaotic spirit, and did not take her word seriously. I didn't take the Tang Dynasty seriously either. Once you're done, take a good rest and ask the doctor to take a good look at your body. After giving the order, he gave the third lady a cold glance. You come with me. After leaving the house, in the courtyard of the Tang Dynasty, the old man raised his hand and slapped the third lady in the face. The Tang family is not yet a place where you can cover up everything. If you tell me what you have done in the future, a divorce letter will be your ending. The words fell and drifted away. The third lady covered her face for a moment and dared not speak, feeling almost ashamed and angry. Everyone in the garden saw her slapped. How can she still maintain her authority in the future? At this moment, Greenheart was deeply impressed by the Tang Dynasty, and his words were respectful. The old lady has a girl in her heart, so there's no need to be afraid. There won't be any hardship in the future, and the third lady won't dare to challenge you anymore. The Tang Dynasty covered a towel and sneered coldly. If I thought like you, I wouldn't be far from death. Tang Laofu's anger was not due to the third lady sparring with her, but because the third lady had no vision to do such things at this time. The most important thing for the Tang family now is for the marshal to stay in Kyoto. Tang Jiang had to return to the capital early to operate. If she died at this time, her birth mother would cause trouble, and Tang Jiang would be guilty of lax governance. The court has reason to condemn Tang Jiang. That's why she dared to ask Greenheart to kneel and beg Tang Jiang. It's not playing cards with family ties, but betting on his ambition. It's night. The third lady was crying in her own yard, causing the third master to be restless. He explained all the reasons to her. She just woke up. She sobbed and said, "So, isn't mother going to make a name for that girl?" To stand out naturally, one still needs to stand out, just to appease her and her mother, so you can blame everything on Do Mama and let her go home and take care of her. The third master took a sip of tea. This is also my mother's order, there must be someone to take responsibility for this matter. At this time, the Tang mansion could not make any mistakes. The next day, the three ladies shed tears and repented for their lax governance, which caused the Tang Dynasty to suffer injustice. Grandma Dou confessed to her crimes without hesitation. The Tang Dynasty was not surprised at all. She had anticipated this outcome and didn't want to hold on to it. Her purpose is not to fight against Mrs. Tang-san. Everything is up to my grandmother to decide. She is obedient and clever. Mr. Tang was very satisfied and nodded repeatedly. Madame San pretended to wipe away her tears and took Tang Dynasty's hand to confess her feelings. My mother will never be deceived again in the future, sorry to see. Little slut, after watching this while, how can I deal with you? The Tang Dynasty smiled lightly and withdrew its hand. As long as Madame Tang does not commit suicide, she will not take the initiative to provoke her. But if she wants to die, no wonder she. Mrs. Tang was even more satisfied and smiled, saying. The court also tidied up, and tomorrow they will follow their grandmother into the palace to meet the Empress Dowager. The Tang Dynasty's heart skipped a beat, fingers pinched in one place, and took a deep breath to bless, yes. The Sanfu people immediately forgot about the Tang Dynasty. Mother, is it our family and all the women going? The Empress spoke up, only taking with her teenage girls at home. She was full of pride on her face. Bringing a girl of appropriate age into the palace, isn't this just for the sake of a talent show? The Tang family should indeed have a decent lady in the palace. As she spoke, Mrs. Tang's eyes swept over her granddaughters one by one. The eldest family is all at the border, so let's not mention it. The third girl from the second family gave birth to a really good baby, with a graceful waist and graceful posture when held tightly. 4 girls are also good, round and plump, full of love. The 2 maids from the third family were slightly inferior. Chow Chow is too thin, looking like a handful of bones. His eyebrows and eyes are delicate, and he needs to be nurtured to see it. Qin Yao has a domineering personality, and sending her to the palace is just causing trouble. It still depends on the second family. Alright, you all prepare well. Tomorrow is very important. Tang Laofu is very insightful. The second and third ladies exchanged a glance and understood their mother-in-law's meaning. After returning, they rubbed their hands and dressed up well. Greenheart is also very excited. Miss, the old lady is going to take you into the palace to see the Empress. The Empress is the most envious person among all the girls in Kyoto. The cherries in the hands of the Tang Dynasty were crushed. Scarlet juice flows out through the fingertips. Is that so? Greenheart nodded vigorously and dutifully told the Tang Dynasty about the Empress's past. The Empress and the current Your Majesty are childhood sweethearts, and Your Majesty loves her very much. If it weren't for the disaster caused by Princess Chang, the Empress wouldn't have delayed her marriage to Your Majesty until last month. Princess Chang of the disaster country. Her reputation as a phoenix rising sun is really not good now. The Tang Dynasty smiled faintly and leaned against the pillow, saying, Princess Chang, but that phoenix Chaoyang. Tell me about her. Greenheart was eager to show her loyalty and quickly said, I heard that the eldest princess was cruel, and extravagant. Many ministers in the court were harmed by her, and she even raised a temple's face, regardless of day or night. But she really shameless. Your Majesty dare not interfere with her. The courtiers who manage her have all been killed by her and her family has been plagiarized. Even the Empress Dowager's family has been completely hacked by Princess Chang. That's Princess Chang's uncle's family, and she really has to be ruthless. I heard it's just because her uncle said, Empress Dowager looks like her. Greenheart chattered about something that the Tang Dynasty could no longer hear. She fell asleep for some reason. Suddenly, I dreamt that day, the sky was filled with apricot blossoms in the backyard. Feng Jing, who was drunk, stumbled in and grabbed her hand, imprisoning her on the bed. A crazy kiss fell on her face. Feng Chaoyang panicked and gave Feng Jing a hard slap. Run away in despair. She never had any concern for Feng Jing, but only regarded him as her dependent younger brother, the child who carefully held her finger, eventually grew up. From that day on, Feng Jing has changed. He wants to imprison her. To erase her name, to destroy her. But her cousin wanted her to die. You'll follow behind us later. If you shouldn't speak, don't speak. Don't collide with the Empress. Tang Qinyao looked at the Tang Dynasty with a disdainful expression on her face. My mother didn't give you my old clothes, why don't you wear them instead? You're wearing such a shabby outfit. Outside the Chongqing Palace, the Tang family's female relatives are all waiting. The Tang Dynasty and Tang Qinyao stood at the end. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. Like an Old Man Returns. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. Like an Old Man Returns. Chongqing Palace. This is the palace of Feng Chaoyang. The best palace in the imperial city is the Chongqing Palace. Even the Emperor's Qinkuan Palace cannot be compared. The Tang Dynasty ignored Tang Qingyao's provocation, just lowered its head and looked at its toes, looking extremely obedient. Lin Qianxue is waiting for me inside. As long as he thought of that woman, the blood all over the Tang Dynasty screamed. The old man has been waiting for a long time, and the empress has just missed an hour reciting sutras for the long princess. Please, the old lady and the girls. The grand palace maid respectfully invited Mrs. Tang to enter. No one in the entire Yuan dynasty dared not give face to the Tang family, even Lin Qianxue, who had already been elevated to the rank of empress. Empress is kind and benevolent. Mrs. Tang smiled vaguely and had no intention of taking the conversation. The grand palace maid was very good at looking at her eyes and didn't say anything more. The group quietly entered the main hall of Chongqing Palace. The familiar Shiha fragrance rushed towards her, which was her commonly used fragrance. During the Tang Dynasty, her breath was slightly suffocated. My wife Lu, with her family, pays respects to the Empress Dowager. The Empress Dowager is 1,000 years old. Several girls knelt together to greet each other. The Tang Dynasty clenched its fists and knelt down with it. Help the old lady up quickly and give her a seat. Lin Qianxue's voice remained as hypocritical as ever. Are these the granddaughters of the old lady? I've heard that the Tang family has a good family education, and the girls are all good. Hurry up and ask me to take a look. A few girls looked up one by one. Lin Qianxue smiled appropriately, praising each one without any jealousy. I was clearly stunned when I saw the Tang Dynasty. Is this the girl from your mansion? Tang Laofu glanced at the Tang Dynasty. Xing Wu is called Chao Chao. Lin Qianxue glanced at Tang Dynasty more and nodded. Chao Chao, a good name, but the flowers on her head are not good. The Tang Dynasty lowered its head and sneered at the corners of its mouth. Lily of the Valley is Feng Chaoyang's favorite flower, while others often hang roses, peonies, and peonies. Only Feng Chaoyang likes to hang a string of lily of the valley in her hair. Tang Laofu pondered for a moment. If the flower on the hairpin is not good, then borrow the palace maid from the empress and exchange it for another one. Lin Qianxue smiled. Imperial Garden. The Tang Dynasty did not tilt its gaze, but there was no hesitation under its feet. The Grand Palace lady smiled and joked, it seems that Miss Wu is very familiar with the palace. The Tang Dynasty's heart thumped. She only thought about how to find a way to go to the library, but forgot about this. Just as she was about to say something, a sharp voice came from the side and called out to the palace maid. But not Duan. If you don't serve the empress, why are you here alone? The Tang Dynasty turned back according to the sound and suddenly saw a familiar face. Feng Jing stood in a yellow robe with his hands down. His expressionless face was filled with disdain. Like a male lion, its aura is as intimidating as a cicada, and its grandeur dare not breathe. A sharp gaze swept over the Tang Dynasty. Who is this? Feng Jing's voice was a bit hoarse, with a low and casual tone. The Tang Dynasty's heartbeat was like a drum. She slowly lifted her head to look at Feng Jing, suppressing the hatred in her eyes. Her clear eyes were only filled with curiosity and excitement to explore. The granddaughter of Tang Jiang, the Grand Marshal of the Grand Marshal of Soldiers and Horses, during the Tang Dynasty, I bow to your majesty, and your majesty is blessed with peace and prosperity. Feng Jing's eyes flickered. The frozen gaze fell on the lily of the valley by her temples. Also, there is a red mole on her ear. He was a bit dazed and vaguely saw another person from the girl in front of him. Why use the lily of the valley hairpin? The Tang Dynasty knew that they had made the right bet. She just needs to be herself and imitate herself to attract Feng Jing's attention. The clothes, attire, lilies of the valley, and red moles on her ears that I entered the palace today are all the preferences of Feng Chaoyang. My daughter likes the sound of the wind, but the wind doesn't always be there. Holding a lily of the bell is like the wind blowing a bell in her ear from time to time. The voice of the Tang Dynasty was clear and clear, without any hesitation, looking directly at the phoenix scenery. The confidence in her eyes added a lot of color to her. The slightly lacking facial features also shone brightly in an instant. Feng Jing's expression became even more dazed. He took 2 steps forward and personally helped up the Tang Dynasty. Xiaofuzi, take out the Suzuki steps from my treasury and reward them to Marshal Tang's granddaughter. Xiaofuzi was startled. Yes. That is His Majesty's private possession, which the Empress once failed to obtain even if she wanted it. This girl is amazing. The cuckoo's expression froze for a moment, and she calmly glanced at the Tang Dynasty. The Tang Dynasty still had a curious expression on its face, as if it didn't feel anything was wrong. Xiaofuzi quickly took the steps and solemnly presented them to the Tang Dynasty. That was carved out of a whole piece of purple jade. Each lily of the valley was lively and lively, like living creatures. The Tang Dynasty's eyes lit up, and he confidently put Bu on his hairpin and shook his head at Feng Jing. Does it look good? The purple lilies of the valley swayed in her hair, making her eyes sparkle like stars. Feng Jing remained silent for a long time. Not bad, thank you, Your Majesty, for your reward. The Tang Dynasty knelt down with a clear and cute voice. Looking down at the head of the Tang Dynasty, Feng Jing didn't say anything. His deep eyes couldn't see to the end. The Tang Dynasty waited for a long time before Feng Jing could speak. When I looked up again, I realized that he had left early. Only Duan looked at her coldly. Miss Wu is really bold. She is so outspoken to His Majesty. Is it possible that no one at Marshal's mansion has taught her rules? Yes, I see that Miss Wu is so unwilling to be ordinary, and I'm afraid she can't learn the rules well. She was sarcastic and sarcastic. They had a thorough understanding of the situation in Tang Mansion, knowing that the girl in front of them was still a fool and was not favored by Tang Mansion. So the cuckoo didn't pay much attention to her. The most important thing is that Duan felt that the Tang Dynasty was seducing the emperor in front of her and did not even consider the empress. She really didn't read it wrong. The Tang Dynasty was indeed deliberately seducing Feng Jing. Suppressing nausea and hatred, deliberately wanting to approach one's enemies. Stroking the lily of the valley at the edge of her temples, the Tang Dynasty slowly stood up. Sister Duan is known for her rules and regulations. I believe she knows the rules very well. So why don't you tell me if questioning the rules of the Marshal's mansion is what Sister Duan means, or is it what Empress Dowager means? It's the Empress's intention. When I return to the mansion, I will ask my grandfather to apologize and apologize to Your Majesty Chen. If it's Sister Duan's own intention, then you can kneel down in front of the Chongqing Palace and accept the punishment yourself. This is a capital offense. The Tang Dynasty exuded a grand aura, showcasing the grandeur of being a princess. The cuckoo's face turned white and she was speechless. Not far from the corner, a bright yellow flickered past. Xiaofuzi said with a playful smile, "You truly deserve to be Marshal Tang's granddaughter. Look at this whole body aura." Feng Jing's expression was indifferent and profound. Don't you think she looks very much like Feng Chaoyang? Xiaofuzi was so scared that he knelt down with a thud. End of this chapter. Chapter 5. Playing Silly. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5. Playing Silly. This fills the Imperial Palace. There are many people like Feng Chaoyang. But the Empress Dowager of Chongqing Palace is the one who bears the most resemblance to Phoenix and Chaoyang. As long as there is a slight similarity in appearance between the princess and the emperor, it can be recognized as a secret that no one dares to reveal. Your Majesty. Xiaofuzi was trembling with fear. Feng Jing glanced at him and said, "You're impressive." You said, Your Majesty looked at her for a long time and even gave her the step shake of the bell orchid. Lin Qinshue's face was faint, but her eyes were wild. I also talked to her for a long time. Yes, madam. This Tang Wu girl is amazing. She is very bold in front of Your Majesty and even taught the servant a lesson, saying that she will be punished. The cuckoo is both angry and afraid. She dare not really offend the Tang family. What do you mean by being a fool? Before I saw it, I was just pretending to be foolish. Lin Chinshua sneered. The Tang family is really good at calculating. They quietly taught such a granddaughter, but Tang Jiang, who never dies, still has a rebellious heart. She propped up the table. Just teach me how to stand by your majesty's side like a phoenix and sunrise, and only I can do it. If your majesty really cares about Feng Chaoyang so much, how could he let her die? No one knows how ruthless your majesty is. Only she understands your majesty. Lin Chenxue took a deep breath, regained the noble demeanor of the empress, and appeared impeccably in front of old lady Tang. Chow Chow, you come. After she sat down, she directly asked Tang Chow Chow to sit next to her. Taking her hand affectionately, she said, I see that Chow Chow is very pleasing to my eyes. The old lady will bring her often in the future. After speaking, he asked Yuan to kneel down and kowtow to the Tang Dynasty to admit his mistake. This dead girl's words were speechless, so my sister hit her to vent her anger. Let's see if she dares to offend my sister next time. Yuan obediently and skillfully knelt down to admit her mistake. Tang Laofu's sharp gaze swept over the Tang Dynasty. The Tang Dynasty blinked and said, Empress Dowager, you can break the bad news of my daughter. Sister Yuan is just teaching my daughter on behalf of her, so I will listen. Lin Chinxue smiled lightly and said meaningfully. I really like it when I look at Chow Chow. The old lady is really good at teaching children. Your family, Chow Chow, is the most outstanding. Upon hearing the Empress's words, old lady Tang is just a fool and knows what it means. She just didn't understand why the Empress suddenly changed her mind and saw China, Korea, and Korea. It was clear that she had been looking down on Chow Chow before. On the way back, Mrs. Tang asked the Tang Dynasty to ride a carriage with her. What happened after you went out with the Queen's palace maid? The Tang Dynasty held out the phoenix scenery to give her a walk. Grandmother, your majesty rewarded me with this string of steps and spoke to my granddaughter for a long time. Mr. Tang was greatly surprised. Tang Jiang, who knew everything, could still sit still. Madame Tang sat slumped down on the soft floor. Why is it that little slut? The emperor is blind and cannot do it. He looks down on her daughter who is as beautiful as flowers and jade. He looks up to such a dead girl from the countryside. Grandma Doe is not here, and Mrs. Tang San doesn't even have anyone to discuss countermeasures. I can only be anxious like ants on a hot pot. Tang Qingyao's handkerchief is about to be twisted into pieces. Mom, come up with a solution. You can't invite that little hoof into the palace. If she gains power, we'll have to kneel and kowtow to her in the future. She is both anxious and angry. If there were anyone in the Tang family who could become a concubine in the palace, it could only be her, Tang Qingyao. Several families are happy, while others are worried. Although Madame Eyre felt a bit regretful, she was not so resistant. Not being a concubine also has its advantages. As long as one's own family is capable, it is enough. Turning around, they pack up their things and make up for the meeting gift for the Tang Dynasty. Green Heart is doing her best to serve the Tang Dynasty. She longed to enter the palace with the Tang Dynasty in her heart. The Tang Dynasty was indifferent to this matter and didn't want to discuss it much. She leaned onto the noble concubine's chair and pinched her forehead, saying, by the way, go tell your grandparents that I want to go back and see my mother. Tang Jiang and his wife did not object. He also had people pack up a lot of things, set up a carriage, and mobilized many servants to serve the Tang Dynasty and return home. It is said to be returning home, but in fact it is not far, just a few dozen miles away from the outskirts of Beijing. Depart in the morning and arrive by noon. Unexpectedly, an accident occurred halfway through. The carriage of the Tang Dynasty collided with another carriage. It was none other than Lu Ruffling, the youngest daughter of Lu Xianye's family, who collided with her in the carriage. The old lady of Lu Xiang, the female tyrant held in the palm of her family. I heard that the Tang Dynasty collided with her carriage, so she jumped out of the car with a whip and shouted to beat the Tang Dynasty up. "Hey, is that the little fool from the Tang family sitting inside, Tang Chow Chow? I heard that you deliberately pretended to be foolish and even colluded with the emperor when you entered the palace, didn't you? Come out and talk, and ask me to see what you really look like." The green heart and face turned white. It sounds like the girl's reputation is gone. "Girl, what should we do?" The Tang Dynasty was not in a hurry at all. Laughing inwardly. Lin Qinshua's methods are really simple. It's too obvious that she was in such a hurry and tripped her up. If it weren't for Lu Xiangye's handwriting, her entourage would naturally stop her. If Lu Xiangye arranges, we wouldn't be his opponents either. We'll just wait for Grandpa's people to come, and we won't conflict with him. In her impression, although Lu Xiangye was cunning, he was a person who sought fame and reputation. This means should not be used. As expected, the heads of Lu Xiangye's mansion grew larger, and a group of people stopped Lu Rufeng. However, Lu Rufeng became even more determined and came forward with a chattering voice, intending to lift the carriage of the Tang Dynasty. The willows are like the wind. At this moment, a cheerful male voice burst into the air. Lu Rufeng's movements paused. The Tang Dynasty was taken aback. A familiar voice. She couldn't help but lift the car curtain to look. I saw a jujube-red horse carrying a dignified man slowly approaching. The man was draped in a crimson orangutan felt cloak, with a dark black collar that accentuated his fair skin like snow. His narrow and long eyes were unusually clear, and his eyes were filled with deep calculations. He had a beautiful appearance with a bright moon in his arms, and his every move and gesture exuded an imposing aura. More imposing than Feng Jing. The Tang Dynasty's heart skipped a beat. Gu Yi, a prince with a different surname who was personally granted by his father during his lifetime. He monopolizes a territory and is almost independent as a king, making him an existence that the court cannot suppress or dare not suppress. How did he come to Beijing? As soon as Lu Rufeng saw him, she became timid and wished to tuck her neck into her clothes, throwing the whip far away in her hand. Gu. Senior brother Gu, why are you here? Gu once read a book with Lu Xiangye. He is the only person Lu Rufeng is afraid of. I heard that there was something suspicious about Princess Chang's passing, so I went to the capital to avenge her. The words fell to the ground. The Tang Dynasty was covered in sweat and hair, and couldn't help but lift a curtain. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. Night Exploration of Tang Mansion. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6 Night Exploration of Tang Mansion. As the curtain was lifted, the Tang Dynasty and Gu Ye's gaze met. Gu Ye was stunned for a moment, then narrowed his eyes. Who is this? Gu Ye Shulang's voice was tinged with a hint of doubt. The posture of the Tang Dynasty was just right, and he spoke calmly. The granddaughter of Marshal Ma, a young female soldier, Tang Jiang, has met a prince during the Tang Dynasty. Gu Yi furrowed his brow and heart. That fool from the Tang family. The guard beside him saw the situation and whispered to him about the whole story. Gu Yi suddenly realized. But he doesn't care about this matter either. Lu Rufeng, go back, Gu Yi said in a deep voice. Upon hearing these words, Lu Rufeng's face changed greatly, and she felt indignant in her heart. She looked up at Gu Yi, instinctively wanting to refute her. However, when she met Gu Ye's pitch-black eyes, she couldn't help but shrink her neck and couldn't say a word. Suppressing her unwillingness, Lu Rufeng quietly and fiercely glared at Tang Chow Chow before turning around and returning to the carriage. Although the carriages collided, nothing really happened. The Tang Dynasty looked at Gu Yi with an indescribable touch in its heart. People say that Princess Phoenix Chaoyang is unforgivable for all her sins, and her death brings great joy to people all over the world. However, Guyi said that her death was mysterious and she went specifically to the capital to seek justice for Princess Phoenix. The Tang Dynasty only felt a warmth in their eyes. Suppressing the complex emotions in his eyes, the Tang Dynasty dismounted from the carriage and leaned slightly towards Guyi, saying, "Thank you, Prince." "It's okay," Guyi waved his hand, not taking this matter to heart at all. He knows exactly what kind of person Lu Rufeng is. If it were anyone from the Tang family, he would stand up. It's to give face to the Tang family, and it's also for Lu Rufeng. After all, he had read with Lu Xiangye, and Lu Rufeng also called him his senior brother, so he couldn't have watched Lu Rufeng go to hell. If the Lu family offends the Tang family, there will be no good outcome. Guyi rode his horse and prepared to leave. The Tang Dynasty suddenly shouted out to him, "Prince, please stay." "What's up?" Guyi stopped and looked down at the Tang Dynasty from a high position. The Tang Dynasty crossed its hands in front of it and said calmly, "The court has something to say." After speaking, he looked around lightly. Guyi instantly understood the meaning of the Tang Dynasty and immediately dismounted from his horse, standing in front of the Tang Dynasty. The Tang Dynasty lowered its voice and said something, and Guyi's face instantly changed. "In a hurry, I can't thank the prince properly. I will definitely come to the court to express my gratitude someday." Tang Dynasty suddenly raised its tone and said calmly. Guyi's gaze towards the Tang Dynasty was full of scrutiny once again. The rumored foolish girl doesn't seem easy. Guyi stared at the Tang Dynasty for a long time. If it were someone else, his legs would have been weak and he would have knelt down in fear. However, the Tang Dynasty maintained this posture and did not dodge his gaze. "It's a bit interesting." Retrieving his gaze, Guyi said, "You don't need to be polite, I still have to hurry." "Prince, walk slowly." The Tang Dynasty blessed him. Without saying anything more, Guyi quickly flipped over and mounted his horse. After walking far away, he coldly ordered the people beside him, "After returning to Beijing, we will secretly investigate something." Finally, he spoke in a low voice about what the Tang Dynasty had said. Those who can follow him to Beijing are all his confidants, so he is completely not worried about any leaks. After Guyi finished speaking, the guard immediately responded, "Yes." At noon, the Tang Dynasty arrived at the place where the original owner's mother lived. The original owner's mother received the news and waited at the door early, eagerly anticipating it. As soon as Tang Chao got off the car, a woman greeted him with a joyful expression on her face and said, "Chao Chao, how are you?" Tang Dynasty was stunned for a moment. This long-lost affection warmed her heart. "I'm fine," Tang Chao Chao sniffed and said softly. The original mother looked up and down at the Tang Dynasty several times, then looked at the carriage of the Tang family, and coupled with the Tang Dynasty repeatedly saying that she was good, the original mother finally believed it. "These years have really been tough for you," said the former owner's mother, her eyes turning red as she spoke of the past. She tightly grasped the hand of the Tang Dynasty, her voice trembling. "If it weren't for I wouldn't have let you suffer so much in the Tang family." Although the woman in front of him was not his own mother, looking at her appearance still left the Tang Dynasty feeling uneasy. Taking a deep breath, Tang Dynasty said softly, "It's already over, isn't it all okay now?" "Yes." Even so, the original owner's mother couldn't laugh out loud, but suddenly thought of something. The original owner's mother quickly grabbed Tang Dynasty's hand and said, "I've forgotten. I must be tired from the fatigue of the boat and carriage. Come in and have dinner, everything you make is what you like." Tang Dynasty smiled and said, "My mother still hurts me." After finishing the meal and staying for a while, the Tang Dynasty was about to set off back. The original owner's mother looked reluctant and said, "After going back, you must take good care of yourself. Don't try to be too strong in anything, just be safe and sound. This is a mother's greatest wish for her child." "Don't worry, mother." Tang Dynasty turned around and patted the original owner's hand. She will definitely take good care of the original owner's mother. The original mother gave a few more instructions, and the Tang Dynasty went back. At the same time, Gu Ye's guards also brought news. Prince, the guard lowered his head with a respectful expression, I have already investigated and there is indeed this matter. Gu Ye's eyes darkened. What the Tang Dynasty told him was about the hidden actions of the emperor's arms, but to his surprise, what the Tang Dynasty said was true. It seems that the Tang Dynasty was really not simple. Gu Ye rubbed his fingertips, feeling even more curious about the Tang Dynasty in his heart. It seems that he needs to see this Tang Dynasty again. The night is like ink. The Tang Dynasty rushed back to the mansion before this, and after washing up, sighed. This day is finally over. I don't know what will happen tomorrow. But she is not afraid of troops for the enemy, earth for floods, and she will make those people pay the price they deserve. Green Heart, the Tang Dynasty pressed his temple, you go down. Yes, Green Heart retreated behind Tang Chaofu. After Green Heart left, she closed the door, but as soon as the door was closed, the window suddenly loosened. The Tang Dynasty was covered in sweat and hair, and his attention was highly focused. He quickly found a shelter and stared at the window in secret. Doubts abound in my heart. Who can't help but want to take her life so quickly? Tang Chao Chao's mind was turning very fast, and he felt the vase beside him at the same time, holding it tightly. In the next moment, the window was opened from outside, and a black figure flexibly flipped through the window. Come out, don't hide. Upon hearing this sound, the Tang Dynasty's defenses dissipated significantly. This voice is exactly that of Gu Yin whom she has only seen today. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Entering the Palace. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 7. Entering the palace. Thinking with his toes, he knew why Gu Yinye was investigating the Tang mansion. The Tang Dynasty stood up and walked up to Gu Yin. Gu Yin raised an eyebrow and looked at the Tang Dynasty. As a lady in the boudoir, I didn't have much reaction to the fact that the man entered her room in the middle of the night. But what did the prince find? The Tang Dynasty didn't beat around the bush and asked directly from the local area. Gu Yin sat down, looking at the Tang Dynasty with a faint light. This woman is very intelligent. With his fingertips lightly tapping on the table, Gu Yin nodded and then said in a deep voice, I'm very curious. How did you know about this? If his guards are correct in their investigation, the Tang Dynasty has always been a fool, and it was only a few days ago that things improved. The situation in the capital is still unclear. How could he be so clear about things that neither he nor a prince knows? The Tang Dynasty was not surprised at all when Gu Yin asked this question. When she whispered the news to Gu Yin, she knew that such a day would come. What she didn't expect was that Gu Yin's movements were so fast. However, as a king with a different surname that even the court dared not suppress, Gu Yin had this ability. This is not important, what's important is that there is indeed this matter, isn't it? The Tang Dynasty did not answer the rhetorical question. Gu Yin glanced high at the Tang Dynasty in her heart. The Tang Dynasty was the first to dare to speak to him like this. However, there is indeed a shadow of the deceased Princess Feng Chaoyang on the body of the Tang Dynasty. Gu Yin looked at the Tang Dynasty with deep eyes, her lips tightly tied, and she pursed her lips without speaking. Tang Dynasty took a deep breath, organized his thoughts, and asked calmly, I dare to ask what the prince plans to do. What do you think this king should do? Gu Yin didn't answer the rhetorical question, his tone casual. He asked the meaning of the Tang Dynasty, not because he trusted the Tang Dynasty, but because he was curious. The Tang Dynasty did not pretend. Make the discovered matter public. Gu Yin paused as he tapped on the table. Do you know what this means? Gu Yin's face was gloomy, and her voice seemed to be wrapped in ice. The terrifying anger swept through the Tang Dynasty. During the Tang Dynasty, there was a pause in breathing. Whether or not to say, Gu Yin is indeed very terrifying. Taking a deep breath, the Tang Dynasty remained calm and composed. I know. In the eyes of the Tang Dynasty, there was a strong hatred. She knew very well what Feng Jing and Lin Qianxue had done, and making it public was just the first surprise she gave them. I have my own decision on this matter. Gu Yin averted his gaze from the Tang Dynasty. He doesn't think it's necessary to make this matter public. Some things need to be held in hand in order to ultimately maximize their value. The Tang Dynasty looked at Gu Yin and said, Your Highness, this is not acceptable. As the words fell, the chin of the Tang Dynasty was tightly grasped by the terrifying man in front of him. Are you working for the teaching king? Gu Yin's hand grew stronger and stronger, and the Tang Dynasty only felt that his chin was about to be crushed. Her eyes were hot with pain, and she said with difficulty, I have violated the court. She was also blinded by hatred just now, and suddenly forgot about the terrifying man in front of her. This is like a living king of hell. Just when the Tang Dynasty couldn't bear the pain anymore, Gu Yin finally let go of her. Taking a deep glance at the Tang Dynasty, Gu Yin stopped speaking and lifted his foot to leave. The window was closed again, and the Tang Dynasty breathed a sigh of relief. Feng Jing finished writing the memorial and pressed his temple with a headache. Your Majesty, should we go back to the Qiankuan Palace or the Chongqing Palace? Xiaofuzi asked with a bow. Feng Jing's mind suddenly flashed with the figure of the Tang Dynasty. After a moment of silence, Feng Jing stood up and said, Chongqing Palace. Madam, the Emperor is coming to the Chongqing Palace, said Du Wan, a palace maid beside Lin Qianxue, with a smile on her face. Upon hearing this, a hint of surprise also appeared on Lin Qianxue's face. Let the cuckoo tidy up her clothes again, and Lin Qianxiao personally went to welcome Feng Jing. My concubine, see the Emperor. Lin Qianxue blessed the bright yellow phoenix Jing. Feng Jing glanced at her and said, Get up. The two of them entered the palace together. After sitting down, Lin Qianxue personally poured a cup of tea for Feng Jing, and her gestures were very similar to those of Feng Chaoyang. This is the best Longjing before the rain, which the Emperor loves the most. Let the servants do these small things. Feng Jing looked at Lin Qianxue. Lin Qianxue gently shook her head and said, I am willing. Feng Jing's heart was soft. After a moment, Feng Jing spoke again, You have also seen those girls from the Tang family. Do you have any favorites? Lin Qianxue's smile slightly froze for a moment, with deep jealousy in her eyes. Feng Jing was asking her this, but she already had an answer in her heart. I don't know why, but this Tang Dynasty could bring her a sense of crisis. But it's okay, she will flatten all these people. Only she can stand beside Feng Jing. Suppressing the madness in her eyes, Lin Qianxue lifted her gaze again and looked at Feng Jing with a gentle and virtuous expression. 5 girls, Tang Dynasty is pretty good. She said she naturally did not want the Tang Dynasty to enter the palace, but Feng Jing thought, so she could only follow Feng Jing's instructions. Feng Jing seemed very satisfied. Call her into the palace tomorrow, I'll also take a look, said Feng Jing. Lin Qianxue smiled brightly and said, that minister's concubine summoned her early tomorrow morning. The two did not mention anything about the Tang Dynasty. It's getting late, let's take a break. After symbolically taking a sip of tea, Feng Jing put down his cup and stood up. Lin Qianxue quickly caught up. The next morning, Feng Jing went to court, and Lin Qianxue had someone summon the Tang Dynasty into the palace. Upon hearing that someone had arrived in the palace, the 3 members of the Tang family were extremely excited. But when she found out that the Empress had announced the Tang Dynasty's entry into the palace, a hint of anger flashed on Lady Tang's face. Tang Qingyao's tightly clenched nails were about to sink into the flesh. This is really the despicable hoof from the Tang Dynasty. Mother, we can't sit idly by. The Tang Dynasty was just a fool. By chance, he followed into the palace and unexpectedly gained the favor of the emperor. It's really annoying. Madame Tang also has a headache. Compared to their restlessness, the Tang dynasty was much more calm. She immediately tidied up and got on the carriage to pick her up. Entering the Chongqing palace, hatred surged out of the Tang dynasty's heart. Chow chow. Lin Qianxue called out to her in a soft voice, affectionately holding her hand and letting her sit next to Lin Qianxue. The Tang dynasty forcibly suppressed the disgust and hatred in their hearts and smiled at Lin Qianxue, Empress. Lin Qianxue's eyes darkened. This Tang dynasty is not exactly like Feng Chaoyang. Does this Tang family think they can establish a foothold in the palace by teaching someone similar to Feng Chaoyang? It's really wishful thinking. However, these were all thoughts in her heart and did not show any on the surface. I see that you are very happy in your heart, and you will come here often to sit down in the future, Lin Qianxue said, patting the back of Tang dynasty's hand. The Tang dynasty pursed its lips and smiled slightly. At this moment, the cuckoo hurriedly walked in and said, "Madam, the emperor is here." End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Don't get addicted to it. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 8. Don't get addicted to it. The eyes of the Tang dynasty darkened. In the next moment, Feng Jing appeared in her sight wearing a bright yellow dragon robe. At the same time, Feng Jing's gaze also fell on the head of the Tang dynasty. The string of bell orchids swayed quietly on the head of the Tang dynasty, making the red mole in her ear even more lively. Lin Qianxue naturally caught sight of Feng Jing's gaze. A hint of jealousy quickly flashed through Lin Qianxue's eyes, and she stood up and turned towards Feng Jingfu, saying, "I see the emperor." The Tang dynasty suppressed their resentment and followed Fu Shen, saying, "My daughter, please see the emperor." "Get up," Feng Jing said, but his gaze never left the Tang dynasty. Even after Feng Jing sat down on his own, he waved to the Tang dynasty and said, "Come and sit next to me." The Tang dynasty walked over obediently and skillfully. "This string of steps looks really nice on you," Feng Jing praised without hesitation. The Tang dynasty remained calm in favor and disgrace. "Thank you very much, Emperor." And Lin Qianxue's teeth were itching with hatred. She certainly understood the reason why Feng Jing looked at the Tang dynasty differently was because the Tang dynasty and Feng Chaoyang were very similar, but even so, she couldn't help but be jealous. My eyes were filled with madness. I wish I could just throw out the Tang dynasty. But in the end, she still stood up rationally, holding the gentle and virtuous demeanor of the empress, and naturally changed the topic. "It's already noon, I believe the court is also hungry. Your Majesty, let's have dinner." Chuan. Feng Jing nodded. The three of them sat at the table, with a slightly strange atmosphere. But the three of them didn't feel at all that Feng Jing was constantly serving dishes to the Tang dynasty. These are all new dishes developed by the imperial kitchen, which are not available outside the palace. The Tang dynasty tilted its head and said, "Thank you very much, Emperor." So it seems that Lin Qianxue has become a dispensable person. Faced with these two people, the Tang dynasty had the same taste and couldn't swallow their food, but they even pretended to be happy. After eating, Feng Jing even appreciated many things from the Tang dynasty. The palace people made several trips inside and outside, carrying several large boxes of things. The Tang dynasty looked at it without any waves in its heart. "Chow chow," Lin Qianxue walked over and said softly, "The emperor's favor towards you is something that no one else has. Do you still like it?" The Tang dynasty quietly watched Lin Qianxue. A cold smile in my heart. It was really difficult for Lin Qianxue. Even though she hated her deeply, she still had to smile back at her. But soon the Tang dynasty chuckled. "Why not be yourself?" "I like it," said the Tang dynasty, and finally looked at Feng Jing standing with his hands down. "My daughter, thank you for the reward from the emperor." A raging hatred surged in my heart. These things were supposed to be hers, but now she still wants to thank her enemies for giving her these rewards. It's really ridiculous. Feng Jing looked down at the Tang Dynasty and said in a deep voice, since that's the case, come and sit in the Chongqing Palace more often in the future. The Empress will remember you in her heart. Nowadays, the Tang Dynasty is still the fifth daughter of the Tang family, and he has never taken a concubine, so it can only be summoned to the palace by Empress Lin Qinxue. Thanks to the Empress's love, my daughter is overjoyed, said the Tang Dynasty with a smile on her face. Feng Jing didn't say anything more and turned around to leave. And Lin Qinxue pretended to chat with the Tang Dynasty for a while, then used the excuse that it was not early to let the Tang Dynasty go back. Do you think the emperor really has a liking for the Tang Dynasty? Looking into the distance, Lin Qinxue whispered to the cuckoo beside her, angrily clenching her fists, her nails almost sinking into the flesh. Yuan didn't think so. It's just that Tang Wu used some tricks, but the emperor must only have Empress Dowager in his heart. Looking at the entire harem, no one can have the favor of Empress Dowager. Lin Qinxue squinted her eyes, and a dangerous light burst from them. What if the Tang Dynasty looked like the phoenix and sunrise again? She is the exception. For the next few days, Feng Jing instructed Lin Qinxue to summon the Tang Dynasty into the palace and showed great favor to the Tang Dynasty, rewarding them with all the good things. This made Lin Qinxue crazily jealous. Everyone also began to discuss, saying that the Tang Dynasty would sooner or later enter the palace as a concubine, and it would still be a favored concubine. Gu Yin also knew about this matter. One night, in the quiet of the night, he sneaked into the Tang family, the boudoir of the Tang Dynasty. After the last incident, the Tang Dynasty took this matter for granted. However, she and Gu Yin have always maintained a distance. Why did the prince come late at night? Tang Dynasty looked at Gu Yin and said calmly. Gu Yin didn't consider herself an outsider at all and sat down on her own. He remained silent, and the Tang Dynasty was not in a hurry. He just stood there obediently, watching him quietly. After a while, Gu Yin finally spoke up, "Do you want to enter the palace as a concubine?" As soon as these words were spoken, the Tang Dynasty knew that Gu Yin came here for her frequent visits to the palace and her deep affection for Feng Jing. Of course, she wouldn't think Gu Yin was jealous. And Gu Yin did not do so. Seeing her not speaking, Gu Yin lightly tapped the table with her knuckles and said in a deep voice, "I must remind you not to get addicted to it." Tang Dynasty was stunned for a moment. She certainly knew she couldn't immerse herself in the tenderness of Feng Jing. She never expected that Gu Yin would come to remind her. "Thank you very much for your reminder, the court will remember it," said the Tang Dynasty calmly. Gu Yin's eyes were deep and he stared closely at the Tang Dynasty. In an instant, Gu Yin left. A gust of wind blew by, and the Tang Dynasty fell silent for a moment. They walked forward and closed the window. To be honest, she doesn't know what Feng Jing means right now. On the second day, Lin Qinxue summoned the Tang Dynasty into the palace as usual. Feng Jing said he wanted the Tang Dynasty to accompany him on a walk in the imperial garden. The Tang Dynasty responded and obediently followed behind Feng Jing. "Your Majesty." Upon hearing the voice of the Tang Dynasty, Feng Jing turned his head slightly to look at her. The Tang Dynasty secretly scrutinized Feng Jing's expression and said, "Why is the emperor so kind to my daughter?" Feng Jing's footsteps paused. A faint smile curled up at the corner of his mouth, implying something unclear. "Do I still need a reason to be good to someone?" After speaking, he smiled twice again, with his hands behind his back, and continued walking forward with a raised step. Next, the Tang Dynasty tested Feng Jing several times and finally confirmed that Feng Jing was acting. The Tang Dynasty sneered. Feng Jing is indeed the same Feng Jing. When it comes to acting, no one can compare to Feng Jing and Lin Qinxue. If it weren't for that, how could she have died so tragically under their hands? Haha. At the same time, Gu Yin resides in the mansion in the capital city. The Dark Guard reported to Gu Yin on the recent developments of the Tang Dynasty. Listening one by one, Gu Yin squinted her eyes thoughtfully. Prince. Gu Yin raised his hand and said, I understand. You can go down. Yes. After the Dark Guards came down, only Gu Yin remained in the huge room. After spending several times with the Tang Dynasty, he could also see the shadow of the late Princess Feng Chaoyang from the Tang Dynasty. It's just too similar. Sometimes it even makes people feel like she is the phoenix rising sun. The figure of the Tang Dynasty came to mind in Gu Yin's mind, and he murmured, the Tang Dynasty. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Gu Yi Doubts. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Gu Yi doubts. After accompanying the Tang Dynasty for a while, Feng Jing was called away by an important matter. Lin Qianxue was dignified and magnanimous, with a gentle smile on her face. I really like Sister Cao Cao in this palace. Would Sister Cao Cao be willing to come to the palace to accompany me? The Tang Dynasty saw Lin Qianxue with a generous smile, and the corners of her mouth slowly curved into a smile. She knew how angry and resentful Lin Qianxue was beneath such a smile, but she couldn't show it and could only act in front of her. Although I hate her in my heart, it's a bit sad to see that I have to perform even my own emotions. After being sent away by the Empress, the Tang Dynasty returned to their mansion. Lin Qianxue looked at the increasingly similar Tang Dynasty with every move, gritting her teeth in anger, and her usually beautiful armor was broken. The Tang Dynasty knew that scenery was acting, and that person was always using the same strategy. Now, how could she be deceived by his acting skills again? But if he wants to play, she can accompany him to do it. The ultimate winner is not certain. The Tang Dynasty frequently entered and exited the imperial palace, which caused dissatisfaction with Tang poultry medicine. Mother. Look at her, she's entering the palace more and more frequently. Shouldn't the emperor really want her to become a concubine? Madame Tang is extremely angry and embarrassed, but there is nothing she can do now. Marshal is still at home, and grandmother is also there. If my grandmother knew she had made a move at this point in time, waiting for her would really be like leaving behind a letter of rest. Even though what was said earlier was just some angry words, if she really got in the way, the old lady wouldn't let her go. Qiniao, don't worry too much. I don't believe it. That girl really has the ability to communicate with heaven and enter the palace. Tang Qiniao bit her lip and was very dissatisfied. But she can't count the number of times she has entered the palace with both hands now. Isn't her mother worried? She shouldn't kneel down, that slut. Madame Tang said helplessly, let's not act rashly for now. Let's tidy up that little hoof well later and let her spend some time in the spotlight. The Tang Dynasty had met with the scenery many times, and Lin Qianxue, who had already disliked the Tang Dynasty, was also very dissatisfied, and even had some panic in her heart. Afraid that Feng Jing was moved. Why do people always try to insert them when they are a perfect match made in heaven and earth? Lin Qianxue's eyes flashed with a hint of malice, and jealousy filled her chest. Miss Tang, is she becoming more and more like a princess? Yuan was taken aback for a moment, and naturally knew what was going on. She lowered her eyes and whispered, the emperor was able to see her so diligently, probably because of this reason. However, the empress doesn't have to worry. After all, you are the empress. Even if she enters the palace, she won't have to rely on her hands to make a living. Then the empress can vent her anger. Lin Qianxue snorted lightly, I don't want that slut to enter the palace. Besides, the emperor's attitude towards that woman makes me very unhappy. Men always like the new and dislike the old. If that woman is even more like me, can she replace me in the palace? Yuan was taken aback and quickly knelt down on the ground. Madam, please forgive me. It was Yuan who said the wrong thing. Lin Qianxue said, get up. I know you have no intention, so let's forget about it this time. However, that woman cannot stay any longer. Staying any longer may lead to trouble. Although she really wants to torture and kill again, if the emperor finds out that he wants to keep that slut, she will have no choice. Yuan. Yes. On the other side, the Tang Dynasty was called by the old lady upon returning to the mansion. Is it the emperor again? The Tang Dynasty showed a simple expression and suppressed his disgust towards those two people. Yes, the empress talked to me for a while, and the emperor came and took me around the palace. The palace is really big. The old lady's expression was very good and she said gently, not bad, it seems that the emperor is interested in you. Tang Dynasty blinked and said, are you saying that the emperor likes me? How could this be? The old lady frowned and said, it's impossible. Although your body has shrunk a bit, your facial bones are indeed delicate. You've been taking good care of yourself lately, so you can argue for a good reputation for our Tang family. Tang Chowchow's eyes flickered slightly. But madam, although Chow Chow really wants to eat better and nourish his body, every time the kitchen sends food, it's leftover food that's hard to swallow. Chow Chow can't make herself grow some meat either. Upon hearing this, the old lady's face flashed with a hint of anger, I understand. During the Tang Dynasty, Yu Guang glanced at the increasingly cold and stern old lady, with a slight curl in her mouth. She knew that the old lady had already taken her words to heart. The people of the Tang family all want to establish a relationship with the emperor, so naturally they will not let others cut off this path. Mrs. Tang has been asking the kitchen staff to bring her leftover food, some of which are still spoiled. Although they are hundreds of times better than the medicine she took, they will not spare Mrs. Tang just like this. The original owner is also the granddaughter of the Tang family, and Lady Tang only dares to secretly fall in love. Now that she appears to have been favored by the Holy Grail, the people of the Tang family will only support her. After learning about Lady Tang's actions, it is feared that there will be some sad days ahead. Sure enough, after she left for a while, Mrs. Tang's San was called to the old lady's place and waited until she came out. Miss, aren't you doing this to startle the snake? Greenheart was a bit puzzled. Didn't she say that if Third Lady didn't make any major moves, she wouldn't do it? Tang Dynasty. Obviously, the Third Lady doesn't want to coexist with me. Since she has already started using those dregs and pickled vegetables to appease me, isn't she declaring war on me? Greenheart lowered her head and thought to herself, Miss, after being enlightened, not only has she become much smarter, but she has also become more ruthless, completely different from that fool before. I dare not have any thoughts of betraying my master in my heart. After Tang San came out of the old lady's place, her expression was very unpleasant. Tang Qinyao quickly supported her mother and said, What's going on with my mother? Madame Tang San said with resentment, I didn't expect that scumbag hooves would report to the old lady, causing me to be fined half a year of silver by the old lady. Besides, I have to copy Buddhist scriptures. Tang Qinyao was taken aback, obviously not expecting that woman to be so bold. Mother, it seems that after that slut is not foolish, his courage has increased significantly. Madame Tang San said, not only has she become bolder, but she has also become smarter. I'm afraid it will be difficult to deal with. If I had known earlier that I should have killed her while she was still foolish. Tang Qinyao frowned and said, Can we only let her go crazy now? Puyi sat in the study, looking at the report presented by his subordinates with a puzzled expression, constantly fiddling with the trigger in his hand. Is it true that the Tang Dynasty really wants to enter the palace? Such frequent entry and exit. However, why is her every move more and more similar to that of the eldest princess? Even the empress seems unable to achieve such a divine resemblance. No wonder the emperor invites her into the palace so frequently. It seems like we have a chance to explore. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. Seeking help from Guyi. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10 Seeking help from Guyi. After waking up, the Tang Dynasty looked at the food on the table in front of them and raised its lips. It seems that what was said yesterday, the old lady has already been taken care of by someone. How is Madame San doing? Greenheart smiled and quickly said, Madame San has been punished by the old lady. I heard she has been fined half a year of silver, and she also needs to copy scriptures. She can't leave the mansion for a month. How refreshing. The Tang Dynasty's face remained calm and composed, and they were not very satisfied with the outcome. After all, the other party had done many things to mistreat the original owner. Anyway, there are more opportunities ahead. They probably won't be honest either, so don't blame her for being impolite. Miss, do you want to take a walk on the street? The Tang Dynasty was stunned and said, shopping. Yeah, Miss always goes to the palace today, so I don't have the chance to take a stroll on the street. I know there's a new shop on this street, why don't I go and take a look? Greenheart really wants to go out. As long as the young lady speaks up, there will definitely be a chance to go out. The Tang Dynasty was in a daze. Before her death, she also loved shopping, but after being cut off, she couldn't go anywhere and waited for endless torture. What she longed for the most at that time was death. Yes, she even longed for death. Thinking of this, the hatred in the eyes of the Tang Dynasty grew even deeper. The hand placed on his knee tightly clenched into a fist, and his face was also very grim. Mississippi. The voice of Greenheart pulled her thoughts back. The Tang Dynasty gave a fake smile without even thinking, what's wrong? Greenheart was a bit scared. Just now, Mrs. Smile scared her, so she spoke up. No, it's nothing. The Tang Dynasty didn't explain their expression just now and said calmly, then let's go out and stroll for a while. I believe the old lady will agree. Sure enough, when Greenheart went to request the old lady, he indeed received approval. The smile on my face couldn't be suppressed. Miss, what you said is indeed true. The old lady agreed without even thinking about it. She also said that if Miss lacks anything, just tell the steward. It seems that the old lady is very considerate of Mississippi. Careful. No, she has become their most valuable chess piece now, so she will naturally provide it well so that she can listen to them. The Tang Dynasty did not explain to Greenheart and smiled, since you agree, let's go take a walk on the street. Greenheart was immediately distracted by the word going out. The two did not take a carriage this time, and the Tang Dynasty only wanted to walk on the street. Looking at the bustling street market, the Tang Dynasty's heart felt a bit obscure. People in this world probably thought that the fake Long Princess was her, right? Even if the scenery dies, can the stigma on her body still be washed away? Miss Tang, my lord has invited me. Suddenly, a man stood in front of them. The Tang Dynasty regained its senses and looked at the man in front of it, frowning. Then, it followed the man to the tea house. I don't know why the prince is looking for my daughter. Guyi casually held the tea, his gaze fixed on the Tang Dynasty. Miss Tang, I have a lot of confusion. I wonder if Miss Tang can answer my question. The Tang Dynasty paused slightly and said, I don't know what difficult thing is trapping the prince. If the court knows, it will definitely share the burden with the prince. Guyi said, recently, Miss Tang has been entering the palace more and more frequently. I wonder if Miss Tang knows the reason behind this. The Tang Dynasty's eyes flickered slightly, and he responded with a smile, does the prince have any ideas? Guyi squinted his eyes and said, Miss Tang should know what the king is talking about. Prince, de Bairi called me here. If someone sees me, it may cause misunderstandings. Guyi frowned and his face darkened as he saw that the Tang Dynasty seemed unwilling to reveal the truth. Don't worry, Miss Tang. No one will know. The Tang Dynasty raised its eyebrows in surprise and said, is that why the prince called me here? Yes, it's not. The Tang Dynasty said, when dealing with people, the thing I dislike the most is vague rhetoric. Yes, yes, no, no. I apologize for the simplicity of my mind and the inability to understand the words of the prince. Gu Yi. He coughed softly and put down the teacup in his hand. I do have doubts about this matter, but I didn't come to you just because of it. Tang Dynasty. I don't know what the prince wants to do with the court. The conversation returned to the beginning, and Gu Ye's mouth twitched slightly, creating some fun in his heart. Gu Yi glanced at the guard behind him, and the guard immediately left the room. Seeing this, the Tang Dynasty also let Green Heart guard outside the door. There were only 2 people left in the room, and Tang Dynasty still stood obediently on the side. Gu Yi took a sip of tea and said, "Last time, I told you not to get addicted to it. It seems that Miss Tang doesn't think so." The Tang Dynasty said calmly, "Do you think the court has become addicted to it?" Gu Yi said, "I originally thought you were really addicted to it. After all, Miss Tang has been very diligent in entering and leaving the palace recently. But when I saw you today, I realized that my previous thoughts were wrong. Miss Tang was not addicted to it." The Tang Dynasty was somewhat surprised. She believed that although her acting skills were not inferior to those 2 despicable people in the palace, they were not inferior. Where did Gu Yi come from? It seems that I guessed right, Gu Heng said as he saw an invisible upward movement at the corner of his mouth. The Tang Dynasty said, "I am truly a prince. My daughter's carving skills were immediately exposed." Gu Yi said, "There's no need to compliment me, but I really want to know why you're doing this." Tang Dynasty. I just don't like the emperor, there's no other reason. Gu Yi squinted his eyes, obviously not very convinced. Besides not liking it, isn't there any other reason? Tang Dynasty. What reason does the prince want to hear? Gu Yi paused and sneered, "Forget it, since you don't want to say it, then don't say it. It's just that you have such close contact with the emperor. Do you think the empress will tolerate you?" Of course, she couldn't tolerate it, and similarly, she couldn't tolerate the other party either. But since she couldn't move Lin Qianxue now, it made her furious and interesting, isn't it? The Tang Dynasty blinked and said, "The empress looks quite good." Gu Yi tugged at the corner of his mouth and said, "You can never underestimate women. Since you can pretend, why can't the empress pretend? Besides, why would the empress want you to enter the palace and become a concubine?" The Tang Dynasty asked tentatively, "What the prince means is that the empress will attack me." Gu Yi casually tapped on the table and said, "What do you think?" She certainly didn't think that Lin Qianxue would let her go. After all, she had a close relationship with Feng Jing recently, and Lin Qianxue might not be able to bear it anymore. That woman has never had much patience, especially with the people Feng Jing likes. Please help Cao Cao, my lord. End of this chapter.